Yacharqankichu yaku tarpuyatikusqanmanta?
Imanataq kanman?
Kay urqukunapiqa mana para kaptinqa yakutan tarpunchik hinaspa pallanchikpas. Achqan qunqarunku kay ñawpa yachayta.
Yakuqa kawsaqmi, hunqanchikmi yaku kasqanchikta. Mayqin pachapipas mana yakuyuq kawsayqa kanchu.
Yaku tarpuyqa kawsayta tantanam. Yachachisqayki. Qatiway.
Quiero regresar donde somos. Sabemos lo que es de nosotros. Sígueme, sígueme donde vamos. Traemos el mapa en la mano. Voy caminando, yeah, hasta que cae la luna, yeah, hasta que el sol se alumbra, yeah, hasta que el mundo nos escucha, yeah, hasta que el mundo escucha. Gente de la tierra, gente de revolución siempre en mis venas. Gente de ríos que fluyen, gente chinampera. Mi gente más fuerte que calor en la frontera. Dentro del agua los balazos no lo encuentran. Y mi son chicuincatea y cano lloro. Amo no chiniquita y cano te loro. Hijo de mi pueblo todavía lejos me espera. Todo lo que tengo es más que el dinero. Si no trae luz no me cura nada. Tan profundo el mundo abajo. Yo espero que tú te escapes. Me dijeron no te pierdas en lo que pase. Donde somos. Sabemos lo que es de nosotros. Sígueme, sígueme donde vamos. Traemos el mapa en la mano. Voy caminando, yeah, hasta que cae la luna, yeah, hasta que el sol se alumbra, yeah, hasta que el mundo nos escucha, yeah, hasta que el mundo escucha.
Siente la fuerza que transmite mi tierra. Es la herencia que dejaron mis abuelas. Esta pollera se mueve y mueve. Siente la música, hace que te eleve. No importa dónde vaya, yo sé de dónde soy. Sígueme hasta llegar al sol. Los caminos se unen, la profecía se cumple. El cóndor desde el sur, el águila del norte. Turi, ñañay, kunaja, parichkan. Yakun, chihap, mampurimu, uchkan. No existen las fronteras. Rakichikuja, sasachacunchu, uyarichikunchikmi. Pachamama, wanmi, cuya paita canchic. Mi alma conecta con la yakumbama. Cuidamos lo que somos. Apukunaja, yaguanchik, nadie nos calla, aunque estemos en llamas.
Gente de la selva, gente de la sierra, mi gente callejera bailando en la luna llena. Mitad de la calle, vengo del oeste, mi gente nos esperan pa' ponerse de rebelde. Gente de la selva, gente de la sierra, mi gente callejera bailando en la luna llena. Mi gente se levanta, no importa lo que pase, mira la belleza de vivir como salvaje. Oh, quiero regresar donde somos. Sabemos lo que es de nosotros. Sígueme, sígueme a donde vamos. Traemos el mapa en la mano. Voy caminando, yeah, hasta que cae la luna, yeah, hasta que el sol se alumbra, yeah, hasta que el mundo nos escucha, yeah, hasta que el mundo escucha.
Hasta que el mundo escucha. Hasta que el mundo escucha. Hasta que el mundo escucha. Hasta que el mundo escucha.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for this important conversation, Climate Action for Vulnerable Communities. I'm Keiko McCracken, she, her pronouns. I'm the External Learning and Development Specialist here at North Sound, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you all today. Thank you so much for being here, and just wonderful to kind of see the crowd continuing to grow for this really essential moment that we're in, and I'm just really thrilled to have you all here with us today. We were just listening to the song Sígueme, or Follow Me, by the climate activist Chetez Cott Martinez and Peruvian singer Renata Flores. In addition to Spanish, the song includes Indigenous languages Nahuatl and Quechua and explores water and Indigenous culture as a source of healing and rebirth. And we'll go ahead and drop the English translation in the chat for folks who would like to find out more. To bring us properly into community together, we ask that you take a moment to reflect on the ancestral lands where you and your family may live, as I read North Sound ACH's land acknowledgement. Our land acknowledgement was created by a former tribal liaison in collaboration with our board's Tribal Alignment Committee. We begin by acknowledging with humility that the land where we are today is the territory of the people of the Salish Sea. Their presence is imbued in the waterways, shorelines, valleys, and mountains of the traditional homelands of the Coast Salish people since time immemorial. For folks in the audience who may be new to our work, North Sound ACH is a community-driven nonprofit working to build a future of health, belonging, joy, connection, and opportunity for all. And at North Sound, whenever we gather, we remind ourselves that we're here to learn, to reflect, and to practice belonging. And these are our agreements for being in community with each other. We invite you to embrace these same actions today in our time together as we center curiosity, courage, connection, care, and compassion. We strive to recognize our own biases. We acknowledge complexity and discomfort. We listen first to listen, and we keep trust in each other. Now, for anyone who may be unfamiliar with Zoom, at the bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll find a few options for interaction today. We'll have time for a live Q&A at the end, so please feel free to add questions as we go along to the chat as they arise. And we also hope that you'll introduce yourself in the chat and add your reflections throughout the session. And finally, not on this slide, but at the end, we will have a short survey for you. We really value your feedback, and we hope that you'll entrust us with your thoughts. And we're going to go ahead and place the survey in the chat right now, so you'll be able to open up the tab right away for ease of access. And we'll do that again at the end of the session. Today, we'll begin with some grounding in our topic, then hear from our wonderful panelists, and finally wrap up with questions from you, our audience. And as we move toward learning, we center ourselves, as always, in one of North Sound's ACH's guiding frameworks, the vital conditions for health and well-being. Climate change, of course, is embedded in all of these conditions, touching on every aspect of our shared lives. And with that in mind, I'd like to take a moment to locate ourselves in this conversation with an audience poll to learn about the role your organization may already play in local climate resilience. And it's okay if the answer is none just yet, because we are all here to learn and encourage each other. And so we're going to go ahead and launch that poll right now to hear some answers. Seeing a lot of partnering with other organizations, a lot of care toward advocating for policies that protect vulnerable communities. It's really lovely to see just the many ways that people are showing up for each other for this important, really just essential, condition that we're all facing. So thank you so much. It looks like, yeah, that partnership, which ACH is all about, that's getting a really strong response. So thank you so much for all of that, folks. It's just really, great to hear from everybody, and love and welcome the folks who are unsure and are here to learn, because you're going to be able to hear from some really amazing experts in this realm. So thanks so much again. Okay, let's see. Let me move on from that. So our learning goals today are to increase knowledge of how climate action affects our region, to increase awareness about current projects and initiatives to protect our communities, and to promote additional cross-sector collaboration to address climate change and its impact. And we begin with a shared understanding. Climate change is real, it's human-driven, and it's already reshaping our present and our future. And we also know that frontline communities, agricultural workers, elders, low-income communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, or people with existing health challenges already face disproportionate exposure to extreme heat, flooding, fires, and compromised air quality, while also navigating barriers to housing, food, employment, and healthcare. But our time today is about hope. It's not about fear or despair. It's about solidarity and it's about solutions. It's about lifting up the voices and leadership of communities that, while facing the greatest risks, are also creating powerful models of resistance. Their lived experience and deep place-based knowledge, from traditional ecological knowledge to community-driven public health initiatives, offer essential guidance for effective and equitable climate action. We're here to learn from these solutions, to increase their visibility, and to consider together how we can strengthen community-driven action that makes us all more resilient and connected in the face of climate change. And while we won't be able to address all of the issues facing communities under threat, our intent is that you walk away with some sense of hope and resolve that is necessary to change outcomes and to create a more welcoming, thriving community for all who call the North Sound home. To fully appreciate this moment of honoring community-centered solutions within climate action, it helps to know where we've been. And Bester Robinson's words remind us that early conservation did not arise out of a social justice framework. It was, in fact, built on exclusion, protecting land for some while shutting others out. And decades later, that same mindset lingers, shaping assumptions about who environmental issues are for and who is included in decision making. And even today, many environmental or climate-centered organizations do not yet include the presence of those most impacted by climate change. And we see in Fred Krupp's dismissal of communities of color as cause-oriented, how environmentalism has often ignored the reality that racism, poverty, and environmental harm are, in fact, deeply connected. But as Danielle Purifoy tells us, even when communities of color lead the fight to protect their homes, their work is rarely recognized as environmentalism, and invisibility itself becomes a form of injustice. And finally, Dorcetta Taylor takes us further, reminding us that the barrier isn't just recognition, it's the refusal to value frontline communities as not only participants, but as thought leaders and solution drivers. So what is climate action through a lens of environmental justice? It's the idea that all people and communities have the right to live and thrive. It's the fair treatment and meaningful involvement of all, and it is the prioritization of the voice of vulnerable populations and overburdened communities in devising solutions. So as we move from exclusion to transformation to finally environmental justice, let's just take a moment to center ourselves again on those we serve. Think about the people that your organization serves. And in just a moment, I'll ask you to share in just 1 or 2 words who you're most concerned about when it comes to climate impact. For example, isolated elders, pregnant parents, farm workers, or kids with health challenges. And add your response to the chat, but don't hit enter just yet. We're all going to press enter together on my count, so we'll see the full waterfall of responses all at once. And I'll pause just a moment to let folks consider their answer. Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. I'm seeing unhoused community members, tribal members, unhoused folks with substance use disorder, agricultural workers, a lot about those who are unhoused, Indigenous communities. It's just fantastic. People of color, yeah, income insecurity, children. Thank you so much. These are fantastic. Thank you so much for focusing on communities that are most in need of our concerted and honestly aggressive response that needs to happen. So with that in mind, I have the very deep pleasure of welcoming our panelists today. I'm so excited to welcome them to this conversation. They're each transformative leaders within their organizations and for their communities, and we're so honored by their presence today. Please welcome Free Borsey of Setting Sun Institute, Santana Rabang of Setting Sun Institute, Tara Villalba of Community to Community, Jonathan Chen of Washington State's Environmental Justice Council, and Ander Russell of Resources. I'm going to stop sharing today and we're going to move to the panel discussion here. Well, welcome and thank you all so much for being part of this panel here. Let me just adjust my screen a little bit so I can see you a little better here. My apologies for that. So great to see you all. And I just would love to hear from each of you about the work that you do in your organizations. And yeah, we'll just start off. Let's see, I'm not seeing Santana or Free or Tara just yet pinned. Um, if I can have some support with that. Here we come on. Okay. So let's see, Jonathan, you're just to my right. So let's start with you and the Environmental Justice Council.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Keiko, for the invitation. I'm really honored to be here, but I just want to say that I'm not an expert at anything. And so there's a great level of discomfort that I have in being part of this panel. But I wanted to do this because of all of you. You help people live healthier, richer, fulfilling lives. And if my thoughts and words can support this work that you do, then I'm happy to set aside time to be here. I am the climate justice.
Let's see. I think Jonathan just froze up here. You just froze for a second, Jonathan.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my
Yeah.
connection is not great, so let me know. I'm getting a warning sign that my connection is unstable. Happy to
Uh-oh.
repeat. So the council was created in 2021 through through the passage of the Healthy Environment for All Act, the HEAL Act. The council provides a forum for the most marginalized voices severely impacted by environmental injustices, environmental harms, and helps guide the state in achieving environmental justice. Um, the council advises state agencies on how to incorporate environmental justice into agency actions and advises the governor and legislature in how to advance environmental justice statewide. There are there are seven HEAL agencies, and they have to comply with the guidance that the council provides. Um, and those are agriculture, commerce, ecology, health, natural resources, transportation, and the Puget Sound Partnership. The EJ Council itself consists of 16 voting members appointed by the governor. They are tribal leaders, community representatives. There's a youth seat, um, environmental justice practitioners, labor representatives, and a business representative. And the executive level from each of the HEAL agencies are also on the council, but they're non-voting members. I started this role in November 2022, and before this, I spent my career as a farmer, educator, and organizer for community urban agriculture. promoting food access and food sovereignty. The summer of 2020, I faced a crisis that really shifted my career. Um, I have pre-existing conditions, and I was very, very afraid of COVID. I never left my house when COVID was became a pandemic until September of that year, when living in Seattle, we had terrible wildfire smoke. Um, the house I was living in at the time did not have any air conditioning units, and there was smoke coming inside the house, and so I couldn't breathe inside the house, and I was also very scared. And for a couple of weeks, I became a climate refugee, having to escape and move somewhere else temporarily, packing my
Yeah.
bag in a couple of hours and then leaving. Um, Fortunately, I was able to stay in a place that had air conditioning. I felt safe, but that just gave me a lens as to how privileged I was and how much suffering other people who have less access to such resources
Yeah.
have. And I really want to make a much larger impact.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. And now, let's see, I'm just going to go in the order of my screen here. Ander, if you would introduce yourself and resources.
Sure. Thank you for inviting me onto this panel. I'm very honored to be here on the panel with all of you all and to be able to speak to everyone who's signed up. I'm Ander Russell. I am a co-executive director at Resources. Resources is a Northwest Washington nonprofit. And we use multi-generational community engagement, community-led action to build just and thriving communities and protect the lands, the waters, and the climate on which we all depend. We've been around for over 40 years. We started as Bellingham Community Recycling and have built in education, youth engagement, environmental advocacy. Over the last several decades, we run the Restore, which diverts used building supply from waste stream. We engage youth in climate action. We work to build healthy watersheds and advocate for natural climate solutions. We work to protect the Salish Sea and ensure it's free of pollution. And we're working to help facilitate a just transition off of fossil fuels and create 100% clean energy in the Northwest. And all of that really, 150% depends on partnerships and working together across all the sectors of government and nonprofits and indigenous-led organizations and labor and all of that. So I'm just really excited to talk about this more with all of you and to learn from my panelists and from the questions.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Santana, if you would introduce yourself.
Nautziam nostalgia, calc amat sunasnat, Santana Rabang sunasnat, chuch lummy, e nooksack, e shwy village sin, Haishka quinisinatachal, e sin klutza tia miqualia. Hello, my respected people. My traditional name is Kelk Amat, and my non-traditional name is Santana. I come from Lummi through my mother, and through my father, I come from Nooksack and First Nations Shwy Village. I work here at Children of the Setting Sun Productions. If you aren't familiar with our organization, we are a Native-led nonprofit. We specialize in Coast Salish storytelling. We do films, documentaries. We have a podcast called Young and Indigenous. We have a book that was released called Just Until. And I work here as a researcher and a podcast producer. I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Santana. Tara, if you are able to introduce yourself, love to hear about your work as well.
Hi, everybody. My name is Tara. My pronouns are she and her. I apologize for not having my video on, but uh, my my Wi-Fi signal is not very stable. And keeping my video off helps me to be able to come through on audio. So thank you for being patient with that. I work with Community to Community. We are a farm worker organization. Um, and inside Community to Community, I do the work of cooperative development and agroecology. Um, I primarily do a lot of work with the cooperative Cooperativa Tierra Libertad that grows food for farm worker communities in Whatcom and Skagit counties. And as a farm worker organization, um, we work directly inside the food system, which well, probably all of you will agree is absolutely essential to our society. But we find that farm workers are systematically and structurally excluded from decision making. And so our work lives inside that realm of practice and policy work.
Thanks so much, Tara. Thanks for being here. We just appreciate your presence, even off camera. It's wonderful to have you. And Free, finally, I just would love to finish with you and the work that you do as well.
Hi, Shkakeko. OCM, Nostalgia CM, Sakvilum, Tsatnesna, Chachlamisin, Noch Chisin Makwalia, Quenis, Nitachel, Nestali, Quenisqual, Aquiquinal Outsun Kuchit, Zet, Lemichasin, Eutatasin, Quenis, Dwanal. Hello, friends and relatives, highly respected people. My name is Free Borsey. My traditional name is Sakvilum. It's a generational name passed down in my lineage. I'm the first one to carry it in 7 generations. I'm from Lummi Nation, or the Lummi speaking people. I would just like to say a few words. I don't know my language. I'm still learning how to speak it, but I'm happy to be here today. I work for an organization called Children of the Setting Sun Productions. We're an Indigenous-led nonprofit based here on the homelands of the Tlactmish or Lummi and Nooksack peoples, and we are an organization rooted in Coast Salish culture, who specializes in blending the traditional Coast Salish storytelling with modern media and the tools. Our areas of work include film and media, performing arts, environmental advocacy, podcasts and education, youth leadership, and we are heavily based in community partnerships with schools, other nonprofits, other environmental organizations, and we are looking to grow and expand our community. Hi, Shka.
Thanks so much, Free. Thanks to each of you for being here today and just for bringing your wisdom and experience into this conversation. It's really just lovely to see you all and see the wonderful audience here. We're going to move on to our panel discussion. I'll ask you in the audience as you listen, please feel free to drop in the chat anything that is standing out to you, or an idea or resource or mindset that you'll take back to your workplace or community from today's session. And so we're going to start our panel here. Each of you will have about 3 minutes to respond to the question. The questions, as we've spoken about earlier, are a little long. So I'll try to sum up some of them too, in addition to just asking the full question. But this first question is about fear. It's about changing the story to a more true story, a more essential story that we need. So this is the question. Fear and despair about climate change often leads to short-term thinking, avoidance, and even hopelessness. How can healthcare providers, educators, and social service organizations tell a different kind of climate story, one that builds psychological resilience, counters despair, and helps communities imagine and invest in long-term futures worth fighting for? So again, the question is, how do we tell a better story, a truer story that helps the organizations that serve our community build resilience and hope within the clients that they serve? And Free, I'll start with you for this question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heiko, and thank you for reading the message. When I read this question, the first thing that I thought of was agency and allowing or leading with agency, putting the ball in your court instead of, we all know the truth, that, and we all could be just spewing this like apocalyptic narrative, but it's really important to, for our communities to understand that we have control, and we have the power to make these kind of changes. And there are examples, real examples of these changes being made, not just in Indigenous communities, but all communities. Community gardens, when they're tended to, they thrive and they can support vulnerable communities in facing food insecurities. Tribal salmon habitat restorations, dam removal projects, and river restoration projects. Just this year, we've seen numbers of salmon returning comparable to like the numbers in the 40s, and our communities were fed, and that's not by accident. That's intentional work and resources being allocated to these different projects. These are real changes happening in real time that provide that are in their own right, their own stories that provide that should be providing us hope. And it's really important to share these victories, make these victories public. I feel like the small victories are equally as important and profound as the big ones, because you can see them, they're local, they're visible. One of the stories that I love to tell, it's a big win for the Lummi Nation, for all Salish people and all people living in the Puget Sound. And Ander is familiar with this, but resources and Lummi Nation, along with a bunch of other community partners, worked together about a decade ago to stop what would have been the largest coal terminal, or the second largest coal terminal, right here in Cherry Point, right here out in Lummi Bay, from being built, and working, through long legal proceeding. They were able to put a halt to a project that would have changed the entire landscape in the way that we see our beautiful town. And that's a story that I don't think is told enough, because we take for granted the fact that our community and our environment didn't change. But stories like that need to be celebrated. They need to be shared. All of the salmon, all of the culvert cases, the projects coming from those cases, and how they're tied to the Bolt decision. Those need to be shared, and our community needs to be educated. Why are all of these salmon habitat restoration projects happening in our community today? That's not by accident. That's very intentional. That stems from years, generations of work from our elders, from our community leaders back from the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. Hard-working people that we're starting to see the payoff from their belief, and for us to feel hopeless, when they face so much bigger battles, would be irresponsible. So I think, yes,
Yeah.
of course. Thank you.
Yeah. No, that's amazing. For others, responses to that same question.
Well, I can jump in. I think that's I Free basically answered the question. But I think it's really um, good to highlight those stories of what's been possible and the stories of folks in the community coming together to push back because I kind of came to this question as a trans non-binary person, I have experienced what collapsing and changing a story that I've been told to believe in looks like. Um, so especially, the story that gender is a fixed binary, and that collapse, that experience, that change of story it wasn't easy. It was painful, but it has taught me how to sit with complexity, sit with, paradigm shifts, to understand that futures don't have to look like the present, futures don't have to look like the past. And we know that these systems that we've been told that we rely on, these exploitive systems, extractive systems, polluting systems that are built on keeping us separated, on trying to control our communities, built on endless growth, they're dying out. They are, and they're not happy about it. And I think so. I think the real work is not, just to hand out optimism or, quick solutions. It's really to talk about the relational work that needs to happen to keep our communities together and hold our communities together. Um, because that's the real threat from climate change, and the real threat to community resilience is the erosion of our ability to show up for each other and to care for each other. And I think healthcare providers, educators, social service workers, folks working on environmental justice, a lot of us already know how to sit with that grief and uncertainty and care and still show up. So embedding more stories about climate change and climate impacts into those communities, into advocacy that's coming out of those spaces as well, so that we're all connected in that and we're all working. And I think Free also mentioned, local work. So I think, no, the impacts of all of these changes are happening locally. And when the roads are blocked from floods, when their air is full of wildfire smoke, it's local folks that are showing up and local people that will be there first to help. And so, remembering that this is where we start making the difference. Um, Safe shelter, clean air, clean water, fair wages, affordable housing, access to food, access to healthcare. All of these things are impacted by climate change, and all of these things can be addressed at the local level. So, to me, that's the story, is stories of communities showing up for each other and coming together. Um,
Yeah.
Stories that don't erase pain, but build resilience. So.
Stories that don't erase pain but build resilience. That's fantastic. Yeah. Thoughts from any of the other panelists, Tara, Santana, or Jonathan?
Sure. Let me jump in here. Um, so at C2C, um, um, we kind of approach this as needing to begin where we want to end up. So we want to have a world, the one that we deserve and want, where people's needs are met and we have the ability to repair the damage in our human and natural ecosystems, and that everything that is necessary for life is protected in common, and that those are kept in the commons. And so, we are part of being able to do that work. I'm glad that you both Free and Ander mentioned, and you also, Keiko, mentioned resilience. Um, you know, um, Mariam Kaba talks about hope is a discipline. I think resilience is a practice. It's not a quality that we just get. It's a practice that we get and that we get to. And I think at the beginning of that, the story has to start with, or the stories that we tell have to start with accepting that the liberation and the systems transformation work is long term. That much of the system that is dominant now has to be stopped, and we have to create new systems out of the past practices that we know work and what we haven't tried yet. And I think what counters despair is the ability to decide what you want to, what piece of the work you're going to take on. You find your crew so that you can get connected and stay grounded on the realities of what's happening. You set your strategy together. You don't do that by yourself in a room locked out of, contact with other people. And then you in that strategy making, you have to be willing to understand things as they are, not as how we want them to be or how we wish they were. Um, and then you have to go and do something. Our stories can't just remain words. Like Free already said, there was action behind that. There was a bold decision, and then but to push that decision, there was action first.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to really center the ability to act. And then at C2C, we have a whole work team and work area of artivism where joy and beauty and music and growth can happen, because we think if our movements are not irresistible, people are not going to want to get aligned. And so it's important to bring the beauty and the joy in it.
I love that, Tara, to make the movement irresistible. I love that. Yeah. Santana, Jonathan, any thoughts to add to this question?
Yeah, I can go next. Yeah, I agree with what has been said before in terms of telling stories about like our victories and resilience. I think how we can contribute to this story is also by everyone acknowledging that they are a part of that story. I think it's so easy for us to think of our lives being separate from one another, especially with technology and us moving more and more into modernization with artificial intelligence. We have become more and more disconnected from our original agreements to Mother Earth. So, what I think is going to help counter despair is us coming back together in community and reminding each other that we're all a part of this story. I truly believe, storytelling is such a powerful tool to create change and inspire hope. It's something we all can really relate to, but I think what's most important is storytelling connects us to one another. We're all on this healing road together, and it starts with learning our creation story. And that goes for Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people, because this space that we occupy has a creation story and has a place-based identity. And all of us should learn what that creation story is and what that place-based identity is, so that we can figure out, what our role and place is in that story. And I think that will help us tell a better story moving forward, so that we can move back to those original agreements that we have with Mother Earth. And so for Lummi people in this specific region, for Lummi, we have a couple origin stories. We have our flood story and we have our salmon woman story, all which you can find online. Our salmon woman story you can find written online if you just Google it. Our flood story you can find on YouTube, and it was explained by our late chief Bill James, who is no longer with us. And throughout all of these stories, we're taught valuable life lessons and values such as respect and reciprocity, gratitude, generosity. And these stories teach us and guide us how to live in balance with the world. So I really encourage everyone to learn about the origin stories and place-based identity of the land of which you occupy. That way you can find your place in the story, because the story is all of ours.
Yeah, thank you, Santana. That is a wonderful reminder that we are all deeply connected to some part of the earth. And just finding that story and just connecting, with those who have come before is just so important. Jonathan, I'll finish up with you with this question, if you have any thoughts to add about this.
I think one of the challenges of telling a story is that the words of the story, the title of the story, the climate crisis, provokes a lot of feelings that can be challenging. Climate is something enormous, something largely out of anyone's control. So, how do we approach that? And the timeline for climate is something that extends beyond our understanding in this culture where we pay attention to something that changes every day or every minute of every day. Um, the word crisis also can invoke a feeling of we need to take immediate action. Um, but on the time scale that this climate change is happening, taking immediate action to put out a fire every single day for the rest of our lives can be exhausting. The word crisis could also invoke a sense of paralysis. There's so much going on. What can I do? Um, and so the question about what roles do healthcare workers, teachers, social service providers, what role can they play in creating a story that inspires hope or action? Um, I think these roles, as I think Ander was saying, I mean, a lot was said by the panel. Something that someone had said before is that the relationship piece, one key to creating a story of action and hope, is the relationship. And these professions, your professions, are ones that are built on relationships. And I feel like these professions are the ones that people trust the most. People trust their doctors, people trust their teachers, their coaches, um, their social workers. And you all have the opportunity to make the connection of what we can do that is tangible, actionable, that can impact the trajectory of our planet. Um, I have asthma. Clean air is not only good for me, it's good for the environment. A local, supporting local food systems not only good for my health, but it's also good for the environment's health. Supporting smart, dense, affordable housing development along public transit corridors is not only better for me, but it's better for the environment. Doctors, nurses, teachers, social workers, they all have the ability to tell that kind of story. That is very
Yeah.
relatable.
I love that, Jonathan, that, just remembering that our bodies are small worlds, right? They're the reflections of the larger world, and what impacts us impacts the world. What impacts the world impacts our own little, temporary collection of atoms and cells that is part of that breathing world. So thank you all for that. The next question, as I look at it now, finally, I'm realizing, oh, it's kind of the same question, but let me ask it just in case it sparks any other thoughts in this matter. So the question is, what role does your work play in helping people see themselves as active participants in this larger story? So it's kind of, a return from a slightly different angle of this same question. But if anyone has any thoughts about that, about like specifically your role in your organization, love to hear about that. Tara, I'll start with you this time. I'm sorry, Tara. My apologies for that.
That's okay. Let's see. Um, so I think that my role in my organization is um, we have kind of four areas of work: um, building the solidarity economy, movement building, artivism, and participatory democracy, the ability to democratically participate in the processes that impact our daily lives. And in my area of work, um, in particular, this has to do with, um, uh, you know, and workers, farm workers in particular, um, for us to build the spaces in our economy where farm workers get to decide what work conditions should look like for them rather than being at the mercy of farmers, especially farmers who are driven to make profit, but not just this is not to say that farmers are our enemies. They're not. You know, they are squeezed by an agricultural system that doesn't work. It doesn't work for the people that work in it, and it doesn't work for the people that it feeds. But we insist on a system that doesn't work um, because it generates the ability, because it can concentrate wealth to a few greedy people. We or a few people that benefit from all the work. We want to build decision making processes and spaces for workers to be able to link the very important work that they do to the conditions that determine the work that they're doing. And one example of that is that since the HEAL Act passed on the state level, um, there has been established heat rules for workers, for agricultural workers in particular. But those heat rules kick in at 85 degrees. But if you work in the fields or you work in a greenhouse, you reach 85 degrees when the outside ambient temperature is still 75. And by the time it's 85 degrees, workers' bodies are overheated already. And so to be able to bring that type of experience and knowledge to the process that determines what heat rules are, that's part of our work, if that makes sense. So how do we bring our communities into that storytelling? They have to be able to tell people who eat berries and people who eat tomatoes and people who like to eat cucumbers that that's what it takes to be able to grow those in our region. And there has to be room for the workers who do that work to be okay, to be healthy, and to have health care, and to have paid breaks, and to have shade, and to have water breaks.
Thanks,
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Any thoughts about that, Jonathan? It looks like a perfect tee off for the work you do with the Environmental Justice Council. But yeah, just any thoughts about that? And we'll get into that actually a little bit more about policy development in a future question. But yeah, anything anyone wants to add? It's that divide, right, between what a policy is or what a legislative action is, and then the actual experience of that by the people who are most impacted by that.
Yeah, I wasn't sure whether or not to chime into. You want to tell the audience, but I don't know if this is the right time. But I will set the table. Um, One of the purposes of the Environmental Justice Council is to elevate the voices of those most marginalized so that they are at their voices, their concerns, their lives are at the focal point of the policymaking process. That's what the HEAL Act tried to change, or is trying to change. Before, there was a history of decision making that was done without the consideration of the people most impacted by those policies. But we're trying to shift that. And the council holds meetings on a monthly basis, or bi-monthly basis. And at those meetings, people can speak up and express their concerns. And there's historical precedent that when communities voice their concerns to the council advocates those to agencies and to the governor's office and the legislature, and things change. And I'll speak more of those changes in the following questions, but that's the work of the council.
Thanks so much. Anyone else want to add some additional thoughts to that question about story and role? Give you a chance to think about it. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next question.
I'll jump in just really quick. I mean, I think Tara said it and others have said it, but it's worth repeating that when we talk about creating a news story and building community power, um, you know, tribes, indigenous-led efforts, farm worker, labor organizations, forest workers, um, queer folks, trans folks, all of these communities have been doing this work through collapses and crises over decades and generations. So I think what Resources tries to do as a primarily white-led, white environmental organization is constantly keep learning and fighting against attempts to sideline those communities or to under-resource those communities or to silence those communities. So ensuring that those communities are being centered in decision making, and then just for us from a policy standpoint, from an engagement standpoint, working to translate things like climate resilience and climate action from concepts into actual policies that center treaty rights, that center impacted communities, so that those changes can be seen on a regional level and then shown to the rest of the country what's possible. Oftentimes we see this tendency to want to rely on some big sweeping federal change or the next election cycle to completely turn everything around. And that's, we're increasingly seeing that is shaky. That's not going to happen. So really telling the story and engaging people in the story of creating and resilience locally. For us, that's through things like natural climate solutions and just transitions off of fossil fuels and centering labor and treaty rights in decision making at a local level. So, yeah.
Thanks, Ander.
Yeah, I would like to just really quickly chime in as well. Um, Something that I have kind of been reflecting on is my experiences in these environmental spaces or the nonprofit spaces. And there are some amazing organizations out there doing incredible work. But I've also been in spaces that have felt uninviting, almost competitive in nature. And that really makes me kind of ponder the question, why? What as a young Indigenous person, why do I feel unwelcome and uninvited in a space that I know I belong in? And I think that makes me want to say, hold it. Just as much as you're trying to change the world, make sure you're focusing on your own healing and your own change as well, and hold a mirror up to yourself as an individual and as an organization. Because we all have to work together to bring to move forward. To move this work forward, we all have to come together, and we have to be mindful of the values we stand on as individuals, as organizations, and what we can, bring to this table, or what we can bring to the table to move this work forward. I guess I could have said that in a better way, but
I think that was great. That was perfect. Yeah. Any final thoughts on this question?
I can quickly, I feel like it was all pretty much said. But I just want to like reiterate, just going back to like seeing yourselves in a part of this story. I think for Children of the Setting Sun Productions, like even though we're a Native-led nonprofit, I think we do a really good job at keeping our door wide open and inviting people in, because it's not, I've said this also time and time again. We did our 10th anniversary celebration video, and then there was a video that I did with Inatai Foundation and around community power building. And I feel like it's something that I will continue saying is it's really not about us as Indigenous peoples, it's about us as people of the world. We all have common goals in terms of wanting to advocate on behalf of Mother Earth. And I think it's better to do that, together than separate, because again, we all live in relationship with the land, the water, our animal relatives. And this just isn't just about one people. Like we all have a responsibility on this earth. And I think one of the times that I've seen us really open that door and allow people to see themselves as a larger part of the story is through our Salmon People project. And our Salmon People project is our largest project here that we have at Children of the Setting Sun Productions. It's something that we call our North Star. It really guides us in the work that we do. And we stood up and we were, reclaiming that we are salmon people. And the more that we claimed that, there's other people that stood up and said, hey, we're salmon people too. And so we really built this really strong community in terms of advocating on behalf of salmon, dam removal, river restoration. And not only have we built that community with Indigenous people, but we've created that community with non-Indigenous people too, because we've shown people in our way through traditional storytelling that if salmon were to go extinct, that it would not only affect Indigenous peoples culturally and spiritually, but it would impact our whole ecosystem. It would impact the whole world. And so I think it's projects like that and stories like that where we're showing people that, hey, it's not just about us as Indigenous people, it's about everybody.
Yeah. Thank you, Santana. And you've already moved us perfectly into the next question, which is that a growing body of evidence shows that Indigenous stewardship and grassroots community-led solutions, pardon me, are among the most effective responses to the climate crisis and creating just transitions. What lessons from Indigenous ecological knowledge and farm worker-led organizing should be prioritized by policymakers, healthcare systems, emergency response networks, and social services to protect vulnerable communities and build upon these shared solutions? So the question is, what lessons from Indigenous ecological knowledge and farm worker organizing should be prioritized by policymakers and others? And I'll start this again. Tara, if you would start us off with that.
Sure, thank you. I for the first thing I want to do is I just want to say thanks for what you just said, Santana, because the project, the Salmon People project, it turned, it's like it's such a great um, tool is not the word, but But it turns out that it actually intersects in our everyday work at the co-op, at the farm workers co-op, because water adjudication is best understood in that lens. Even though there are farmers all across Whatcom County that want us as a farm to disregard that story about salmon and only talk about the extractive part of agriculture, and to protect our right to extract, you know. And it was like that's not a right, that's not a thing, and we're not on board with that. But to, you know, to those of us that have grown up in this extractive system, that, you know, it requires stopping and considering the stories of salmon to do that. And it is actually translatable, not literally, but you know, figuratively, it is absolutely translatable to people whose first language is not Lami or English. Um, uh, um, uh, we, even though we don't speak Laktamish, we the workers at the cooperative understand that water is not something that is supposed to be privately owned, and that the forest is not, you know, that the forest, and the waters inside the forest that the forest protects is related to the water that we draw to produce the culturally relevant food that farm workers need to have access to. It's not at all a difficult leap for them. It's actually difficult for the workers to understand the private property structures that govern the land that we're currently farming on, because it is completely counter to land that is communally um, ad, uh, administered, like communally decided upon by the people that are using that land. It's completely not at all in the framework of land ownership, private property ownership here in the US. And so I think, but I do want to get at that question. Hopefully I still have a little bit of time to get at that question you're asking about, you know, what are some of the lessons or some of the things that we see that are making this work, that's getting in the way of us being able to lead in this work. And one of that is this process mechanism that is essential to white supremacy and to impoverishing people, which is scapegoating. It's blaming the wrong people for the problems that we are facing. And it was used against Jewish communities in Europe years ago. It has been used and continues to be used against Indigenous people. Just think about water adjudication in Whatcom County, where they're being portrayed like they're the problem, but they are not actually the problem. It's our it's it's the settler entitlement to the water that is the problem. But it's also being increasingly used to target immigrants. We cannot forget that that's the mechanism that's being used to squish us at this moment. And so we have to be very disciplined and diligent about calling out scapegoating as a mechanism that is necessary for capitalism to work and for racism to work. And we have to take that apart, because we can't move our work forward without understanding that and being committed to not participating in that.
Thanks, Tara. That is just gosh, we could have a whole learning session diving into that. Thank you so much for bringing up that kind of, you know, one of the festering wounds in our communities is definitely what you have mentioned. I'm going to just let others also answer this same question. So again, the question is about Indigenous stewardship, grassroots community-led solutions, that should be prioritized by policymakers and others?
When we listen to voices who are on the front lines, the communities and the people that are most harmed by what's happening in our environment, by policies that are destructive, then in many ways we can all benefit. It's that really common idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. A couple examples of this is someone that Dara might be familiar with. Rosalinda Guillen used to be a member of the Environmental Justice Council, and she's a worker advocate. And one of the major leverages of influence that the Environmental Justice Council has is to provide recommendations for where hundreds of millions of dollars that can be directed to benefit overburdened communities and tribes. And from Rosalinda's perspective, she really felt that climate change, smoke, heat, extreme heat, were impacting farm workers. And she really wanted there to be funds to provide safety protections for those farm workers. She advocated for that kind of policy. And what the legislature ended up doing was expanding that idea to not just be for farm workers, but to outdoor workers in general. There are construction workers. There are, well, it's mostly farm workers and construction workers, but really anyone working outdoors, outdoor professions. And they're all benefiting from this grant that was Rosalind's idea because she really wanted to put the protections of farm workers at the center. Another policy example is the Shoalwater Bay Indian tribe had raised an issue to the Environmental Justice Council about how they are being displaced because of sea level rise, and they needed more funds to relocate their homes and buildings to higher ground. And when we brought that to um, the council co-chair, he is the chair of the Colville Nation. He understood that climate change is also impacting tribes on the east side of Washington State. Climate change is not just sea level rise, but the wildfires are destroying their native foods. And so he wanted a policy recommendation, a budget recommendation to be expansive to say that climate change is impacting tribes all across the state, and there should be funds to provide all of them. And that's what manifested in the legislature too. So once again, the ideas that come forth from Indigenous communities, from marginalized communities, can really benefit beyond just themselves, can benefit all of us.
Thanks so much, Jonathan. Other thoughts from folks?
I'll chime in. We I have the honor and privilege of working with farmers in this project with another organization. This man by the name of Aaron Strait, he's a local creative artist, but he's a videographer and he has a company called Soulcraft. And they're partner or Setting Sun partnered with them, and we're actually in the middle of this project right now, where we're bringing tribal representatives of Whatcom County and city officials and farmers in the same space to have conversations and build relationship around the water adjudication. Um, and we're coming as ourselves. We're not coming as representatives of farmers. We're not coming as representatives of tribes or our elected positions. We're coming as individuals who we are as a person. And we visited the some farms out in Linden, and it was so powerful to be hearing their stories. It's like, and it was like I was like, wow, they sound just like us, because there a lot of these farms, they're generational. Like we're seeing like third, fourth, even fifth generation ownership and responsibility, in these farms, and they're some of the oldest water right holders, in this region alongside tribes, and yeah, I think that building that relationship, it's really taught me a lot about that way of life, and it's really reframed my way of thinking when it comes to farmers, because my before this project, my preconceived notion of farmers was just through legal cases that Lummi Nation have, that fought like farmers for the rough history that we have between the two groups. But actually, um, what this project reminded me of was that pointing the finger is probably the worst thing that you can do. Like, oh, it's his fault. Oh, it's their fault. That's not going to solve anything. That's just going to bring more tension and honestly disrupt the vision that we all have. Um, and then something that Jay Julius, one of our Lummi leaders, brought up was that the treaties that were brought here weren't brought here by the indigenous communities. They were brought here by your government. They were brought here by the federal government of the United States, and we signed those treaties in exchange for this beautiful place that we all get to call home. Our elders had established, our ancestors had established these promises. And I think if anybody has anything to say about treaties, or before you even engage in this conversation, you really need to educate yourself on what these treaties are, what these promises are, and maybe understand where tribes are coming from, and how many of these promises were broken are still not kept today, and how many of these um, anyway, I don't want to go into a treaty tangent, but the point that I want to bring is that our ancestors prioritized three things. They prioritized healthcare, our environment, and education, and those three things still reign true today for us. So maybe we can take a lesson from what our ancestors prioritized for our people, for the broader community. I think those are still a priority for us today, for all people. So
Thanks, Free. Any other thoughts about that? We're running just a little bit short of time, but would love to want to make sure that we just take full advantage of all the wisdom in the room today too.
Yeah, I'll quickly add some of my thoughts. I feel like when I think of lessons to share, I feel like the biggest one that comes to mind is encouraging people to decolonize their mind and then indigenize their mind. And if you are unsure how to do that, maybe it first comes with understanding what colonization is and the impacts it's had on Indigenous communities. And I think for me, like how you decolonize your mind to indigenize your mind is really just this basic understanding that we are not separate from Mother Earth. Our healing as a people is dependent on the healing of Mother Earth, and it's interconnected in so many ways. And I want to use this as an opportunity to share about a podcast series that I had the opportunity of starting. It's called Healing Woman Heals Mother Earth. And I started this series because I was really inspired by all of the strong Indigenous women that were involved in our Salmon People Project. And these are women who are leading movements, advocating on behalf of salmon, dam removal, and river restoration. But I think what's so important about this series is not only amplifying the work that they do, um, and amplifying their voices, but also talking about how they take care of themselves while being involved with such high level advocacy work. And I truly believe like when we heal as women, we're in turn able to help heal Mother Earth. So, throughout this series, I amplify their work and what they do in environmental stewardship and cultural preservation. But central to these talks is the interconnectedness between our mind, body, and spirit with the natural world. I think women recognize the burden that we have in all of these areas. We depend on our holistic health in order to sustain our critical roles as cultural caretakers, environmental activists, and community leaders. So if there's any lessons to be learned, it's from Indigenous women who are leading such heavy work. And I really encourage all of you to go and listen to the Healing Woman Heals Mother Earth podcast series, which you can find on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Just to name a few women that I got to interview, I got to interview Amy Bowers Cordalis, who is the leading attorney in Yurok that led the dam removal for the Yurok tribe. I interviewed Francis Charles, who led the dam removal along the Elwha River. I interviewed Kaylani Scott, who is the Colombian Snake River campaign director, who's leading the work on dam removals in her territories. And so all of these women have such huge relationships with the land, and they talk about how, when they're not feeling well, then they see how in turn that affects our earth. And then I also want to recommend another good episode, which is on All My Relations podcast, and it's called Healing the Land is Healing Ourselves. And that is a really good podcast episode to listen to as well, to help kind of gain an understanding of our interconnectedness as a people to the interconnectedness of Mother Earth.
Thanks, Santana. That's so amazing. And we'll be sure in the communications that we'll send out after this session today that we're going to just include all of the links that you mentioned and the resources that you mentioned. So folks will have access to all of that too. So thanks so much. Ander, I know we didn't get to you, but I think the next question is also, a question for you. Well, it's for all of you, but I think you're all going to have some really great answers to that. And here's the question. With federal climate science and disaster preparedness efforts increasingly undermined in our present times, the need for local and state leadership has never been greater. What strategies do you see as most effective for building power, forging cross-sector partnerships, and ensuring that vulnerable communities, not corporations or outside interests, are centered in shaping climate and health policy moving forward? So the question is about building power, forging partnerships, collaboration, and centering the voice of vulnerable communities. And I'll start with you with this one.
Yeah, I think the answer to this one is almost was answered already. If there's one thing we can do, if there's two things we can do uh, to build power and to solve some of these problems, it's to center workers and center tribes and indigenous led organizations, because that's where Tara talked about it earlier. This system that we have is exploitive, it's extractive, it's polluting, it's not working, and the answers are coming from those communities. So not just I learned this week. So the State Environmental Policy Act, SEPA, you have to go through SEPA if you have like a big project, like if you're expanding fossil fuel up at Cherry Industries up at Cherry Point, or doing any sort of big development project. I learned that SEPA has a provision. They have to consult like local tribes and other agencies, but if they don't hear back, it is actually written in our state law that if they don't hear back, that is implied that that group supports the project. That's, that's not the consent I teach my 12-year-old step kiddo. Yes is yes. No answer does not mean yes. So there's that. So, ensuring that the decision making is centered on those most impacted. So, and when we talk about building power, shaping climate policy, shaping health policy, again, it's labor, it's tribes, it's impacted communities, it's LGBTQIA communities that have been doing that work and organizing and building power. And so the strategy is to stop sidelining them. And what does that look like? It looks like that relational work. That is, it's not quick, it's not easy, it's long relational work. So we need to fund organizations and efforts that are led by impacted communities. When we need to fund them in the long term, um, not just, oh, here's some funding for a quick project, but long-term funding, shared governance, not just inviting folks to the table, but actually centering them in the decision making, following the lead of these communities. Um, Not working in silos, so partnerships. Again, these systems, they are built on separating us, separating our movements, squashing solidarity actions, trying to intimidate organizations, not allowing that to happen. Weaving our local organizations and efforts together to push back. And then, yeah, drawing the line against corporate interests and exploitive efforts. So, if our policy tables are dominated by those voices, our communities are gonna lose out. Um, so the most effective strategies are the ones that are basically have been operating on these lands since time immemorial. They're systems based on care, based on reciprocity, based on economies based on regenerative, healing, not extracting or exploiting. And that's like Santana said, that's recognizing that what's happening to the earth is happening to us. What we're doing to the earth, we're doing to ourselves. Um, and I'm going to say this, and anybody who I work, who had resources, who's my coworker, might be on here, is going to just roll their eyes and be like, of course, we have the second most regressive tax structure in the country. The only state that taxes poor people at a higher rate than us is Florida. So, I mean, in a state that supposedly has gotten more progressive in the last couple election cycles, that's not okay. So we need to fix that, and we need to, alongside of of getting rid of the old systems, capitalistic exploitive systems that exist, we also need to recognize that we need to resource our local communities. We need to say no more to being held hostage by these industries, the fossil fuel industry, industrial ag, the tech industry, aviation industry, all these industries, that are exacerbating wealth inequality in our state, exploiting labor, exploiting the planet for profit. The wealth belongs in the hands of those who have created it for their communities.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was that was necessary to say. So thank you so much. And Jonathan, this makes me kind of turn to you. I know you have some information about an upcoming listening session, and love to hear about that now.
Thanks for setting that up. Um, like I had said earlier, the Environmental Justice Council, they have meetings every other month. The Environmental Justice Council has meetings every other month, but they only meet in person so far once a year. They're hosting their in-person gathering on September 25th in the neighborhood of where most of you are, not actual neighborhood, but in the local vicinity of where you all are, in Anacortes on the Swinomish Casino and Resort. The reason why I want to share this information with you to address this particular question is because this is an opportunity that the council is trying trying to gather and listen to those most directly impacted by the harms, by environmental harms. Um, the examples I had mentioned before in this session about how you can take action at this council and the council transforms your voice into actual policy changes is real. It manifests, and this is a great way for you to make your voices heard. Um, there's going to be a roundtable session in the afternoon where different topics are going to be discussed: uplifting immigrants and refugees, emerging and urgent issues in and around that area, um, the budget recommendations to direct the funds that come from the Climate Commitment Act to benefiting overburdened communities and tribes. And then one other issue, which relates to the refineries, the two refineries and the two industrial gas plants that are located in Anacortes. Um, so a little policy background. When the CCA was passed, they created a marketplace where high polluting industries can pay for the pollution that they produce, pay for the carbon pollution that they produce, that they emit in the atmosphere. Um, the idea is that if you have to pay for it, there's an incentive, financial incentive to reduce that pollution. And there's also a limit. And every single year, that limit of the number of permits that are allowed um, decreases. And so the less supply there is, the more expensive each permit costs, which incentivizes businesses to buy their permits more now than later on when they become more expensive. There was an exception. The legislature recognized that there are certain industries that are too vital for this economy to put any additional financial burden on them for their pollution, for fear that they might relocate out of state. That would lose jobs. It would decrease the revenue that we generate in the state from those businesses. But as a result, they are essentially polluting for free, as opposed to all the other industries. The refineries and the gas power plants, or the industrial gas plants in Anacortes, are those industries that get to pollute for free. That is going to change. There is a part of the Climate Commitment Act which says that the Environmental Justice Council can give a recommendation as to what these industries, what the pricing for their permits should be from 2035 to 2050. At this gathering on September 25th, we want to hear from the people living near those refineries and industrial gas plants. What is it like to live so close to these polluting industries? What information do you want to share with this council so they can provide the best guidance to the legislature on how these industries should pay for the pollution? The event is completely free. Go to those links. Just show up. There's free food. We want to hear from all voices. It's going to be a wonderful time.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And it's just chatting internally with my team about the documentary that you and I have spoken about called March Point that was filmed by Swinomish Youth maybe 20 years ago or so, and it's really quite powerful. So we'll try to find that, and if we can't drop it in the chat now, then we'll add it to the information that we send out later. It's a little bit hard to find streaming these days, but it's a really, really powerful documentary. Any other thoughts about that question about forging partnerships and in particular cross-sector partnerships, building power, centering the voice of community in this time when on the national level there's no guarantee of support.
I want to add something here, which is that one of the strategies that C2C tried to do before this administration got started was to build structural protections for uh, workers who are not making a living wage, which includes farm workers and many immigrants, impoverished people, including young people and elders, um, because it was clear that it's tending towards uh, violently pushing out these communities from any possibility of structural protections. Um, and here I'm talking about, unlawful detentions, um, deportations, imprisonment, um, deportations to countries that immigrants don't have any relationship to. So I think one of the things that, we've now reached a point where we didn't do that work a few years ago, and now we don't have structural protections in our local area that will protect those communities in particular. And so we are now at a place where we're like several steps back, trying to defend our civic spaces so that impoverished communities are welcome and can participate meaningfully in the governance of our daily lives and our work lives. And I think that is a strategy that has been effective, like with what Jonathan had said about the statewide EJ Council. Um, the tribes are able to use their resources to protect the most vulnerable people in the tribes, but what we need is in a society in our communities where these structural protections have been stripped away or have been refused, we have to create these openings for the leadership of impacted communities. Um, and we have to do it in action and not just in resolutions. Like we have to, it has to happen.
Thanks so much, Chada. Any other thoughts from folks about this question? That cross-sector partnership that's so important to, building relationships, but also seeing the issue as not a single community's issue, but something that it powerfully impacts all of us in the same way, Santana, you were describing how salmon, the story of salmon and the presence of salmon is not, it's not an indigenous issue, it's a whole body, whole community indicator of health and well-being.
Yeah, I'd like to chime in a little bit. Um, I think that it's really important. It's really important to acknowledge the responsibility isn't just an Indigenous issue; it's an issue for all of us. And then, in that same light, I would also like to acknowledge that decision-making authority isn't just a non-Indigenous issue. We're not just here to be consulted. We need to put leadership positions and leadership and this power in the hands of Indigenous people as well in that same light. And that moves us from just being a reactive force to also being a proactive force as well. And different examples of this, can be seen happening, but we need to have that. We need to have that at a higher rate, and then also building capacity in our communities to be able to engage in uh, these conversations in these different arenas as well. Tribes are the best way I've heard it said was tribes are punching well above their weight class right now and that's true. And there are real solutions and real answers out there. We just haven't we haven't found that yet. And I love what Andrew had brought up about Washington State. Maybe you didn't say it this way, but I heard it said this way, and I couldn't agree more. Washington State needs to grow up. We've been a safe haven for the wealthy, and it's kind of it's not it totally goes against our values as a state and what we're building towards. We need to see that shift. So that's all. Ashka.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you all so much for this wisdom sharing today. It's been a really wonderful conversation, which is going to continue with just an audience Q&A. We know that many of you in the audience have been holding your own questions and your experiences and your challenges, and we want to make room for that right now. We're going to start with some questions that were actually asked during the registration process. But let us know in the chat if other questions are coming up for you, or points of reflection, or things that you would like to, give voice to. And we'll try to get to as many of those questions and comments as we can. But starting from those questions that came in during the registration process, the first question is, how can we better resource culturally relevant, place-based learning for students as a frontline climate strategy? And this question was specifically asked for Whatcom County students, but I think it really should just apply broadly to how we are teaching our youth about climate strategy and the place that they live. So I just want to open up that to all of the panelists. Who'd like to take on that question first? Culturally relevant, place-based learning for students as a frontline climate strategy.
Free, did you want to go?
Yeah, I was trying. There's the question. How can we better research culturally relevant? Thank you. Yeah, I would love to take that question. Well, there's a mandate in Washington State that was passed a couple years called the Since Time Immemorial Mandate, and it's an unfunded mandate. Unfortunately, we got to push to get it funded, but it makes it a requirement for schools in Washington State to educate on the history of the state and the real history, and with that, a lot of schools have taken it upon themselves. A lot of educators have taken it upon themselves to just educate about Native Americans in general, which is really nice because we're not just a relic of the past. We're not just history. We're also thriving today as well, and we're a huge part of the state's economy. We're obviously a big part of protecting the environment here in Washington and everywhere. But one of the ways that we've been able to support educators with our work at Children of the Setting Sun is because it's an unfunded mandate. It puts the weight of that of trying to educate on educators, and it gives us the opportunity to provide resources and allow educators to educate in an appropriate way. So, gosh, I'm sorry, I'm kind of rambling. I gotta read this question again. And this is my question. It should be pretty. For me, I like to kind of bring my own story into this because the way that I was passed down, the responsibility, inherent responsibility, was that elders were brought into schools, were brought into classrooms, and they got to share their stories that were passed down to them. Why protecting the climate was so important. Why engaging in these arenas, even if they were uncomfortable, even if they didn't make sense to them, was so important. It was because they had the seventh generation mindset that was bestowed upon them from their elders, and those values and stuff that are passed down inherently in our culture, should be passed down in your culture as well, and in all communities. It's that those values and stuff, when you're a kid, they might not make a whole lot of sense to you, but like you get enough experience, and you get enough like time with your elders, with community leaders, with the right people educating in the right way, it does make a difference. And Santana and I are living proof that these stories and stuff being told in our communities do make a difference. And um, yeah.
Yeah, I love the way you put that free. Like, we teach children their place in the story before they can fully grasp all of the implications of that and the amplifications of that. And yeah, it's really lovely. Any other thoughts on this question about just place-based learning for students as I love the way the person put this as a frontline community climate strategy of just, something that was really essential to supporting youth as they inherit this planet, this earth.
One of the key pillars of environmental justice is making sure that those most impacted have a voice in the decisions that impact them. And I would reframe, or my answer to the question would be students, young people, should be in the positions to decide on what is the best culturally relevant place-based learning for them. Students should hold positions in school boards. They should hold positions in city councils, county government. And it's not just what do they call it? A position where they hold the office, but they have no voting power. It's just, I can't remember what that's called. But they actually have a voice and have a vote. On the Environmental Justice Council, there's one youth seat, and the youth representative is actually co-chair of the council itself. Um, they hold a lot of power and influence, and it's so important because they are the inheritors of what we are creating right now. So they should be at the forefront of making this.
Yeah, I love that, Jonathan. When you were saying, the usual structure of having a student representative, they have the seat, but they have no voting. They have no voting capacity. And as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, well, that's indoctrination. That's, bringing somebody on board to tell them what you want them to think or do, instead of hearing from their own experiences. So thank you so much for that. We're going to wrap up with one other question from the registration process, which is, um, Forrest, I see you on the call. I think this came from you. How does one shift from viewing environmental issues through the narrow lens of human thriving to the community of all creation? So again, the question is, how does one shift from viewing environmental issues through the narrow lens of human thriving to the community of all creation?
Of human thriving. Sorry,
Yeah.
I just
So
realized I'm off mute. I think it's kind of just what I was saying before too, of like understanding that the place that we occupy has a creation story and a place-based identity. And, we're all a part of this creation story, non-Indigenous and non-Indigenous. This place was created for us to live in balance with it and take care of it. And I think just developing the mindset around not being separate from creation, but rather a part of it.
I love that. Any other thoughts?
I wanted to chime in here. If it's okay, I just want to say one of the ways that we at C2C are trying to respond to this whole thing about youth as frontline folks is that we have invited a handful, like 4 to 6 young people from Whatcom and Skagit counties to be youth workers and trainees in the farm so that they get to learn, because the message that young people get is that there is no future in farm work, which is actually not true, because everybody is going to need to eat. And we have to be able to practice how to grow food, and how to keep our waters clean and cool for the food that we treasure so much in this part of the world. But the other piece too around, not just being focused on human thriving is we are building an agroecology training center. It's not really a training center. We're having to switch the way we think about that too. It's an agroecology practice center where farm workers and young people can practice agroecological practices and experiment and learn in that way, because there isn't space in the public school curriculum, especially the way it's being cut down today, for young people to get to learn things like seed keeping, seed saving, the history of who has been stewarding what seed. Um, Also, how tending the soil is actually part of growing food and not just extracting nutrients from the soil into whatever vegetable we're trying to harvest. And so all of that, I think, means we have to have relationships with microbes and worms and leaves, and waters, and rocks, all of the things. And kind of like Santana was saying, we're part of this bigger whole, that the nutrients inside our bodies are inside the rocks also. And we have to have that level of relationship.
Thanks, Tara. That's, everything you say, 100%. Thank you so much. I'm going to just move us to a close here and ensure that everyone gets out on time. I want to thank our panelists for all of their wisdom. There's so much more that could be said, on this. Free, did you want to say something more? Yeah.
I had one thing to say. It's kind of a fun fact. In our language, in Lummi language, in the Coast Salish, in any Coast Salish language that I've heard, there's no word for nature.
Oh.
And I think that's very symbolic in that we've never separated ourselves from nature like some other cultures may have, a little bit. And I think that was just really important to acknowledge that we are one, with nature. All the decisions that we make affect all of us, and all of us being the water, the land, all of our relatives, the winged ones, the four-legged, all of them, the smaller germs and bacteria. Everything that we do impacts everything around us, including ourselves. And yeah, thank you.
I really love that. And that kind of shifts the question to another lens and challenges the premise of that separation. So thank you, Free. That's a wonderful closing for us all to remember that we are all one, and that is what we work toward every day, whether it's North Sound, whether it's the organizations that you serve. It is that idea to come back to kind of an original truth about each other and about the planet. So thank you both. Thank you all so much for this. I just want to kind of be mindful of our time here. And just thanks again, everyone, for sharing your wisdom and your experience and for being part of this essential conversation. I'm going to share screen again for just a little bit longer to wrap us up here and to provide some additional final information for everyone here today. This is just a short snippet from a poem that was written after one of the major storms that our country went through a few years ago by K.B. Brookins, who is a Black poet. And I just, reflecting on everything you heard today, what it makes it clear is that climate change is not only an environmental issue, it's a community care issue. It touches on the lives of our elders, our children, rural neighbors, families expecting new life, and communities who have too often been left out of decision making. And the takeaway is simple but so profound. Resilience is built through connection. And as we move toward a close, I invite you all in the audience to carry two questions with you. Who can I partner with to protect and serve and strengthen the people we serve? And what is one action my organization can take now to build resilience for the future? Together, we can move beyond managing harm to building a more just, regenerative, and caring future. And on a related note, I just want to call out that September is, in fact, Emergency Preparedness Month. And as a potential support for your efforts as organizations, just calling out that there are still a few days left to apply for North Sound's Response and Resilience Grant. The deadline is September 19th, and you can find out more in the link that we're going to drop in the chat right now about that. Before you leave, again, we really hope you'll take a moment to fill out our session survey. It really helps us meet your needs in the future. And we also just want to invite you all to our next conversation, which is going to be on disability advocacy and justice on November 19th. And we're just already assembling a great panel, and we hope you'll join us then for that too. And we'll drop the link in the chat for that too. So thank you all again for all of your time today and for setting aside moments in your day to talk about things that matter most.